Hey everyone, it's Zara, and I'm back to do a quick flip through of my 2025 reading journal. I thought that this would be helpful just to kind of go through my reading journal as a whole. So starting off, these pages I used at the beginning of my Happy Planner. This is a Happy Planner monthly layout, but most Happy Planners have these kind of perpetual calendar type pages, and I used them to mark off what time I spent reading each day, and it wasn't a great indicator all the time. There were plenty of times when I'd come to fill out my reading journal at the end of the month, and I would have up until like the third filled out, and then I'd be trying to figure out how much I read roughly for the entire month. So I don't know that I'm going to continue this in 2026, but it was still just a way I thought of using these pages. I've seen other people track page numbers. I've seen one time I used this and I would write down when I started a book and then I'd like arrow to the date that I completed it, but that got to be messy because I read multiple books at the same time, so then I'd have arrows all over the place. So yeah, I'm not really sure if I just won't use these pages in 2026 or if I will do something different. But then in January, I read 6 books. My favorite book was Big Lies in a Small Town. I used the monthly pages just to track when I started and finished books. I use, these are the monthly pages or the monthly layout for the Happy Planner, like I said. I like that it comes with these trackers, so I track when I read a Kindle book, a physical book, or an audiobook. I used this space up here to pull a quote each month. And then for the first couple of the months, I used this area to plan or to mark down new releases that I was interested in. But I don't necessarily read a ton of new releases, and so for me, this ended up not being as useful, or I didn't do it at all later on in the months. But, for, I don't know, up through March or so, you'll see this as a new release section. I use this check it off section just to mark down when what books I was currently in progress for. So for example, Spy Mom, I was reading in January, but I didn't finish it in January, so I didn't check it off. But I was still currently reading it. I used this section here as a bingo board just to mark down different challenges that I wanted to focus on, especially monthly challenges. There are a few different kind of yearly challenges that had one prompt per month, like the buzzword readathon or the buzzword challenge. And so I try to pull the prompts into this bingo so I could remember to focus on those as I was choosing books, after finishing books on my list. I also used this section for top priorities. So, trying to put monthly goals. I did have every month a goal of reading every day, which I did complete. Some of my other goals I was less successful on, but that is generally speaking how I set up my pages each month. Then there's a lot of notes pages, and I used it in January. I don't know that I used it any other month. I also had a baby in January, so life just got a little bit more hectic, but I hope to restart using these notes pages again in the future, just because I like, when I'm trying to debate what books to choose or trying to find a book that matches a prompt, it's nice to pull out books from my Goodreads TBR, from my bookshelf, just to jot down in here as ideas. So then moving into February, I read 9 books. Nothing to See Here was my favorite of the month. And then you'll see I still used those pages, I guess, in February as well. Then in March, I read 11 books. The Good Daughter was my favorite. And a lot of my stickers that I pull are from like Live Love Posh or Mojo Jojo Plans. I also use stickers from Caliva Plan, like the florals especially, or Amber Plants Her Day. Then in April, I read 9 books. My favorite was The Queen of Sugar Hill. And I guess I used the notes pages more than I thought, I guess, but I definitely didn't use them near the end of the year. Then in May, I read 8 books. My favorite book was One Perfect Couple by Ruth Ware. And I like using these stickers just to fill up the space, especially for new releases. I didn't fill it out at all. You know, it's nice to kind of take up the space. Then my reading slowed down a lot in June, just that it was the summer and it was busy. So I only read 4 books in the month of June, and Everything is Tuberculosis was my favorite. Definitely a recommendation if you haven't read that. It was one of my favorites for the year. And then this is when I stopped using the notes pages. Then for July, I read 5 books, and Sunrise on the Reaping was my favorite. Then for August, I read 7 books, and Crown of Midnight was my favorite. I started reading the Throne of Glass series this year, and I've been enjoying that. I will hopefully finish the Throne of Glass series this upcoming year, 2026. Then in September, I read 7 books, and the Happy Ever After playlist was my favorite by Abby Jimenez. And then in October, I read 11 books, and my favorite was Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. And I would say I read 11 books because 6 of them were short stories. Then in November, I read 7 books, and my favorite book was Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers. And then lastly, in December, I read 6 books, and my favorite book was The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. So then moving on, the next section in my reading journal are different kinds of trackers. So I have this Goodreads tracker. This is from a shop that's no longer open. This was from the Shelfie Chronicles as well as the stickers inside, but I just like to mark down when I finish a book what format I read it in, and if I read it in multiple formats, I will usually just mark down what the majority of time was spent reading it on. So if I listen to the audiobook and then switch to the physical book for the end, I'll still mark it as an audiobook since most of the journey was audiobook. And as you can see, throughout the year, audiobooks were definitely my most read format, just because, again, I had a newborn at the beginning of the year, and even just in general, it's, I think, easier to have an audiobook going while I'm updating my reading journal or cleaning the house or things like that. It's not always easy for me to devote time solely to, reading words on a page, which is fine. Then I have my monthly review. This is from Plan with Elise. I have a couple of different printables from her, but I like this just as a way to compare the months all in one place. Then I have my reading tracker. This is from JoJo's Pretty Paper Shop. I like and I don't like this one. I wish I would have planned out the colors better. So usually or most often, I just pull a color, for October. For instance, I used orange, and so then I kind of based my theme around it. And so then when I was filling this out, I'd fill out orange for the October books. And I used mild liners to color it in. But the problem with this is that they just kind of didn't look very pretty altogether, in my opinion. And so, and I didn't want to repeat colors because I was doing each color a different month, or each month a different color. So I don't love the way that this turned out. I have another similar tracker for my 2026 planner, but I think instead of coloring them in per each month, I'm just going to not include this part of it and write the titles on the spines and maybe just do like neutral colors, something to that regard. I don't know exactly how I'll fill it out, but like I said, I just didn't love the way that this all came together because I felt like some of the colors I wouldn't have picked to go together if I would have been really thinking things through. Then I have my reading 50 books and 100 books trackers from Plan with Elise, and I made it to 90 books for the year. I think my goal that I set on Goodreads was 100, but I'm still very happy with 90, and next year I'm setting my goal at 90. So then the next section of my reading journal is the individual reading reviews or book reviews. And these are also a printable from Plan with Elise, but I just mark the number that I'm on for the book in the upper corner. I use Canva to print my book covers, and then I usually write the start and finish dates, the genre, how many pages, or if it was an audiobook, what time, how much time the audiobook was lengthwise. And then I usually just try to jot down a few elements from the story, maybe how I felt reading it, characters' names, things like that. I at one point used this section to put in quotes from the books, but when I read a lot of audiobooks, I don't always write down quotes because I'm doing other things, and it got to be a bit of a burden to do it that way for me, but that is another way that you could use these types of pages for. I also like that it's not too much space, because I have seen some reading journals where they give you a whole page per book or a half a page per book, and again, that can be a little overwhelming. So I do like that it's, 3 per page. It feels like just enough space to write something down. So those were all 90 books that I read this year. Then flipping into my challenges, I don't typically flip through this in my monthly reviews just because it gets to be a little bit much. So I'll kind of briefly go over them here. But I had different reading challenges just from different stickers that I've bought. I was trying not to buy extra stickers when I put together this reading journal, so I actually made a bunch of these trackers myself, just with pen and paper or with stickers I already had, just because, since I had a baby coming, I didn't want to spend a bunch of money on my hobby that I didn't have to, because we were buying a bunch of baby stuff in that December-January time frame. And then, she was born in January instead of February. So, so this monthly reading challenge, I believe, was from Peanut Butter Taco, and it had little images that I cut off, if I remember correctly, just because I wanted it to be more neutral and less colorful. But I liked this one I like monthly challenges because it's pretty simple to pull one book that meets a prompt. So for example, January was the first book recommended to you, February, a love story, March, a green book. So just kind of an easy one prompt. But then there's also challenges in here that are going to be yearly prompts where it's like 50 prompts to go through, and then I just kind of pull them throughout the year based on what I'm reading. And there's some that I never will get to because I'm not interested in it. I used to try a lot harder to complete every challenge that I did, but I think that they're just a fun way to guide your reading. They don't necessarily have to be, the end all be all. So I did complete this reading challenge. Then I have the buzzword challenge. I have the buzzword challenge and the buzzword cover challenge. I didn't finish December for either of these. Again, I just had family in town, and it ended up not being something that I was really focusing on. And so I'll try again this next year. I do really like, this is one of my favorite ones, so I will be doing the 2026 version. Then I had the Nerdy Gal Studio Challenge. She had some reading stickers that she released, and so I, just pulled the prompts and I made my own boxes for them. And I did end up finishing this one. Then I had the Pops Sugar Challenge, and this one had some kind of, even when I was writing down the 2026 Pop Sugar Challenge, it has a lot of off-the-wall prompts that a book about a food truck, a book about a run club, like just things that I don't have any interest in reading, or I don't have any books in mind. Then there's some that it's like a book about a non-traditional education. There's books that I can think of, but they're books that I've already read. And so, this one I feel like there were a lot of prompts that I just wasn't interested in, so I didn't finish them all, which is fine. Then I have the Wizarding Professions Challenge. This is put on by the Harry Potter and the Order of the Planners Facebook group. They usually do some sort of a Harry Potter themed reading challenge. I think this is like the 7th year that they did it, something to that effect. So I'll be doing it again in 2026, but there's a few that I didn't finish, and there's some too that as I'm reading a book, I'm trying to keep things in mind, like a book that mentions Harry Potter. I know I read books that mentioned Harry Potter, but by the time I got to putting things in the challenges, I couldn't remember what they were, so I didn't do that. But I did a good portion of this one. There's just, here and there prompts I didn't complete. Then I had the From the Vault Challenge, which was a Taylor Swift inspired vault track challenge. And I did most of these. There were a couple that I didn't finish, but that's okay. Then for my alphabet challenge, I believe these stickers are from Peanut Butter Taco. Not 100% sure though. And I actually did really good. I wasn't specifically reading anything for this, or I wasn't going back to find books, but I did everything except for Y and Z. So all in all, not too bad. Then I had the Rainbow Reading Challenge. These stickers were from the Prairie Planner, and I didn't do gold or silver. And sometimes too, I feel like when I'm reading an audiobook, sometimes it's hard to tell if the cover has like gold foiling, and I try to do a predominantly gold or predominantly silver or predominantly red cover, and so yeah, just none of the books that I read really fit that exactly. Then I have my 25 and 25 list, which I did not do so well on. I just made it over half. I think I read 13 on this list. And I think I just kind of forgot about it partway through the year, or just wasn't focused on those. I own most of these books. I don't own a few, so that also threw me for a loop, like the Marlowe Murder Club, I don't own, and the Empire of Pain, I don't own. I own most of the other ones as a physical book, but again, it was harder for me to read physical books this year. And then when I wanted to read it as an audiobook, some of the wait lists were really long, or I just didn't think about putting holds on some of these until later in the year. So I was not super successful in this 25 and 25 list, which is fine, but I am carrying over all but one of these books that I didn't read into a 26 and 26 list, which I think eventually I might just have to do like a, 15. Might just have to make an even number, because I'm never going to be able to read 30 and 30 or etc., etc. The only book that I am not carrying forward from this list is The Wishing Game. I watched Books and Lala read this book this year, and she had such negative things to say about it that it really turned me off from wanting to read it. I do own it. I maybe will try reading it again in a year or two, or maybe I just won't read it. But she had such a like negative review of the book that it really turned me off from wanting to read it. So I didn't think I needed to carry that one forward. But I believe I carried forward everything else on this list that I didn't already read. And this book list was comprised of looking at Goodreads and pulling things that were really old, that were like the oldest on my TBR, as well as some things that were more recent acquisitions that I just hadn't been focused on, or kind of everything in between. So I thought this was a good mix of, you know, trying to read some older things, and I definitely did. Or things that had been on my list. You know, Throne of Glass has been a recommendation from my best friend for a while, so I was glad that I finally got to that one. Or Absent in the Spring, I think, was my oldest book on my TBR. It was an Agatha Christie written under a pseudonym. And so, yeah, I feel like I did a good job of reading some things that I maybe wouldn't have read otherwise or wouldn't have immediately thought to pick up. So then I think this, my last page, is my book bingo. This again is a printable from Plan with Elise. I did pretty good. I didn't get a blackout, which was kind of my initial thoughts. I didn't read a 2024 Goodreads award winner. I had a couple on my list, but I just didn't read any of them that I think were the award winner. Then my husband picking my book, he did buy me a book for Christmas, so I could definitely do that next year. And then read a book of the month in the month that it was received. I did not do that. I've been really bad with my book of the months. Again, physical books versus reading a lot of audiobooks right now. But I did read a few from last year that I got as an audiobook from the library, you know, to get it off of my TBR. And then reread a favorite. Technically, I reread a favorite, which was The Jungle, but I used it for reread a classic. So I didn't mark off both squares because I only use one square per prompt. So all in all, not too bad. I'm going to make a version of this for 2026 as well. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed my flip through of my 2025 reading journal. I will be back soon with my 2026 reading journal, which will hopefully be just as much fun as this year. Bye, guys.